Hi, the Mudbrooker here. I got a couple of projects going on today. You can hear one of them ticking away in the background. I'll show you that when we're at the end of the video. Today, my other project is canning honey. Now, most people don't really think of canning honey when they think of canning things, but honey is the easiest thing in the world to can, for a couple of reasons. First of all, you don't really need to can it. Honey doesn't need to be preserved because it doesn't go bad. But I have a gallon jar of honey, and it's not exactly the world's most convenient container, so I'm going to repackage this all into half pints. The other thing is, if you have a jar that doesn't seal, well, it doesn't really matter. Canning honey also keeps it from crystallizing. I love crystallized honey though, so I'm going to set a couple aside in the cupboard without canning them. But first, before we get started, I would like to thank my patrons on Patreon: Kay's Kist, Benedict Riggers, Tiarna Jenkins, Joy Jones, Kimber, and the Alvin Biker. Here's to you guys. Now, even though honey doesn't really need to be preserved, if you're going to can it, you still have to follow the proper sanitary procedures. My jars are all sterilized. My rings are sterilized. I'm going to be open bath, boiling water bath canning this honey. I'm going to use my pressure canner as a water bath canner. I'm not going to put it under pressure. But it's big enough that it allows me to double stack these half pints and I can get them all done in one batch. Now, it's pretty easy. I had this jar of honey sitting in a sink full of hot water for about an hour, so it's thinned down nice. You don't even really need to do that, but it makes it pour a lot easier. I'll just jar one up quick, and let me get over here into the viewfinder a little better. It's hard to see my viewfinder from this angle, but warming up the honey makes it flow a lot easier. Let's see, can you see that? Not really. Get down here where you can see. It makes it nice and thin and runny, and it doesn't take nearly so long. To can honey, you want to treat it just like you would jelly. You give it about a 1/4 inch of head space, just like that. Set that aside. And then I have a little vinegar here, and a piece of paper towel. Carefully wipe off the rim of your jar so that there's nothing on the rim to interfere with the sealing. And you put your lid on. It's off camera so you can't see it, but I have my lid sitting in a thing of hot water. It used to be you had to boil your lids, but you don't really need to do that anymore. You just have to keep them in hot water to soften up the rubber compound a little bit so they seal. I'm going to get a bunch of these jarred up, and then I'll come back and show you the rest. Everything's all jarred up now and in the canner. As I said before, I'm using my pressure canner as a water bath canner. When you're pressure canning, you only need about 3 inches of, or about 3 quarts of water rather, in the canner. But when you're water bath canning, your jars have to be completely submerged, and you want 2 or 3 inches of water over the top. Since my jars were warm and the honey was warm, I filled this with warm water. It's already heating up a little bit. But what I'll do now is grab my lid, and I'll just set the lid on there loosely. I'm not going to seal it down, I'm not going to build any pressure with it, but I'm just going to let this boil. Once it comes to a boil, we'll start the timer on it, and I'll tell you how much time when it starts to boil. Okay, we've come to a full boil, which is what you need to do for a water bath canning. That means it's time to start our timer. I'm going to give this 10 minutes, like I said, just like you would for jelly, and we'll come back when this is ready to come out. Okay, my timer went off. That means it's time to take these out. when you take things out of the canner, as I've recently learned, something I always did anyway, but you can get a condition called flat sour. Basically, the food, if it stays too warm for too long, can ferment, and it gets a flat because it doesn't make gas, and sour because it turns sour. That's not really going to be a problem with honey. It most happens with certain vegetables like corn and tomatoes, but it can happen with just about anything. Anyway, you want to space your jars out a little bit so the air can circulate around them so that they can cool. Once they're cool, you can crowd them together. And you can probably hear these already starting to pop, which is nice. Out of that gallon jar of honey, it wasn't really weighed out or measured. It was just roughly a gallon. I got 15 half pints, which I canned, and about 2/3 of a half pint, which I'm going to leave in the cupboard so it can crystallize. I put it in half pints because a half pint is 1 cup, and it's handy for recipes because if you need a half a cup of honey, you can just eyeball a half cup of honey. And those are just pinging left and right. And there you have it, canned honey. Even though it isn't really necessary to can it, it still comes in handy. And if you were wondering what the ominous ticking in the background was, I'm cooking down tomato sauce. That's my next project for the day. Hopefully I got enough time to get this done before the wee hours of the morning. But I hope you enjoy the video, and that's how you can up honey. See you next time.